Hello everybody, and welcome to our second Q&A on Furlough Pay. My name's Nikki Caster, Director of Pay Academy, and I'm joined by James Dean. Hello James.
Hello.
Who many of you will know or will have spoken to, and you may well have seen him on our first Q&A. So what we're going to look at over the next few minutes is how to calculate furlough pay and also how to calculate your claim for furlough pay, which I'm hoping will become evident may not necessarily be the same thing. So we have again put this together from questions you have asked us. James is going to put some questions to me and I will do my best to answer them. Thanks very much. Take it away, James.
Okay, so how do we calculate the pay and or reclaim for salaried staff, and how do we do this for the variable paid staff as well?
Okay, so for salaried staff it's pretty straightforward, which is it is their normal contractual salaried pay. You can pay 100% of it, you will only be able to claim 80%. You can choose to simply pay 80% of it. And therefore your claim will be the same amount that you have paid, but you would have to demonstrate if the HMRC asked to see the records that was only 80% of their normal contractual pay. And also do be aware there is a cap of £2,500 per employee per month. Variable pay is a little bit more complicated. Again, starting point would be the contract of employment. So if they are contracted for a number of hours, then really you should be using the contract pay. If there's 0 hours, i.e. completely variable, then you have essentially a choice. And you can choose to claim the higher of. You might wonder why you would not claim the higher of. I suppose ultimately it would still come down to cash flow because you've got to pay it before you can claim it. But it is the higher of either the previous 12 months, so if you're looking at April, that would be the previous tax year's average pay period earnings. So if you're running a monthly payroll, you would look back at what they'd earned in the previous tax year. So from April 19 to March 20, you divide that by 12, and that will be your starting point for that month's furlough pay. You would then take 80% of that figure for the claim, and you can pay 80% of that figure. Again, you can pay 100% of that figure, but you will only be able to claim 80% of that average figure. The alternative approach is that you simply look at that month in the previous year. So April 19, you would use for calculating the figure for April 20. And again, remember that your claim, at least, you can pay 100%, but your claim will only be for 80% of that figure, again, subject to that £2,500 cap. If you have somebody who wasn't working that previous period, then obviously you would need to use the averaging approach. It's a bit complicated, but that's essentially how it would work.
Okay. And so some of our staff joined us in the last 3 to 4 months. What would happen to them?
Yeah, okay, well obviously you can't use the comparative month from the previous year because they weren't there, so you would use the averaging process, but clearly you would not average that over 12 months, that would be illogical. So you would average it over the period of time for which they have worked for you. So if it's 4 months, you would take that figure and divide those 4 months of pay by 4, and that would give you your average pay as your starting point for calculating the furloughed figure. And remember that furloughed figure will then be 80% of that in terms of your claim.
And for non-variable pay, what constitutes normal salary?
Okay, so this is somebody who's on a salary. Again, a lot of it will come down to what's in the employment contract, but it's contractual pay. So in most cases that will be basic salary. It will potentially include other contractual pay elements, such as, for example, car allowance. We have no reason to believe that can't form part of the normal salary. If you had a guaranteed commission, which you get in some businesses, then that again we believe would form part of that contractual salary and form part of the calculation. However, again, do remember that is subject to the £2,500 cap per employee per month.
And does this also apply to apprentices?
Yep, it's all employees that were on the payroll as at the 28th of February.
And what about other costs to the employer? So, for example, employers, NI, employer pension, apprenticeship levy, that sort of thing.
Okay. Yeah, there is some relief for some of this. So employers' national insurance, you can claim on your furloughed employees, subject to the amount that you've paid them. And that calculation works on from £0. So if somebody has been furloughed and their furlough pay, which is 80% of their normal pay, is say £1,000 in the month, then the NI would be calculated on that £1,000 from £0. In other words, the nil band would be applied, and then the 13.8% would go on top of that. And that would form part of your claim. As far as pension is concerned, again, you've got to ensure that the person you're claiming the furlough pay for was still in the pension. If they have ceased, opted out of their pension, or were never eligible to go in it and never joined it, you can't claim pension. So it's important that you establish that the employee you're doing the claim for was in the pension. And again, you can claim the statutory minimum. So that's the 3% on the qualifying earnings basis. So for the qualifying earnings basis of pension, there is that nil band on which pension is not calculated. So those are the three elements that you can claim. The gross salary, however you might determine that, the associated employer's NI, and the statutory minimum employer pension if they were in the pension scheme. There is no relief for apprenticeship levy. For those of you that aren't involved, apprenticeship levy is a 0.5% levy on your total payroll cost, subject to a nil band. There is no apprenticeship levy relief of any kind. So it's just those three elements: the pay, your employer's pension, your employer's NI, and your employer's pension.
And so do we have to notify you of who's on furlough and from when?
Yes, it's very important that you tell us, and this is because in order for you to be able to make this application, make this claim, you will need this information back from us. So what you'll need to do is, on your input sheets, you will need to identify who is on furlough pay, whether or not you're paying them 80% or 100%, because bear in mind, on furlough, you can still pay them 100%, but the claim will only be 80%. And the date from which they are being furloughed, because there may be people that worked part of April and were furloughed partway through. It won't necessarily and doesn't need to be for the whole pay reference period. So it's important that you tell us those things. We will then calculate any deductions that need to be made. In other words, what we're almost certainly going to do is there'll be a column on the sheet which will be furlough pay. So if you say to us, this person has been furloughed from the 1st of April and we are not topping up their pay, their monthly pay, instead of being monthly pay, will be furlough pay, and it will be 80% of that figure. Now, what that means is that when we run your payroll, we're in a position where we will be able to produce a report that will show everybody that's been furloughed. It will give their gross pay. We can then use that data to extrapolate the employer NI figure and the employer pension figure. As far as we understand it, when you come to submit your claim on the portal, it will not be on a line-by-line employee basis. It will be lumps. So it will be a total amount that you are claiming for a pay reference period, and you will need to say the number of employees that covers. But we do not believe you will need to submit something line by line. But obviously what we need to make sure you have got is the supporting documentation behind that, which will link to an RTI submission, so that should the revenue challenge it, you will have the necessary documentation to show how you came up with those claim figures. So it's very important that you tell us who's been furloughed, when they've been furloughed from, and whether or not you are topping up their pay. And you will need to let us know that as part of the input data, part of the input sheet process.
And what about employees that started work since the 1st of March? So we have a number of employees that, for example, came straight in from other jobs. So they worked throughout, but they started after the 1st of March. What would happen to them?
Well, this is a difficult one, and there's a lot of lobbying going on to try and improve the position for these people. But at the moment, they are unfortunately somewhat at the mercy of their previous employer. In other words, if they were on a payroll at the 28th of February on somebody else's payroll, they can go back on that payroll. In other words, they can reverse out that leaving date and they can be furloughed. I've got to say, I'm struggling to get my head round as an employer. I think if you laid the person off or made them redundant at the end of February because your business was already being affected, then I think you've probably got a very good case. If you had simply left that job in order to start a new one, I'm not sure how receptive an employer, an ex-employer, is going to be to putting you back on the payroll and funding that pay until the grant is given. I struggle to get my head around how that would actually work, but in theory that is one possible solution, that only the employee can pursue that. There's nothing you can do as the new employer. As the new employer, your options are very limited. One probably almost completely impractical solution would be to divert any work that is left in the business to those people that are new. That in itself obviously can create all sorts of commercial issues, aside from whether or not it's even doable. The alternative is that you lay them off, make them redundant, come to some arrangement with them to take unpaid leave. I mean, all of those things are governed by amendments to the employment contract, and they're only things you can negotiate out between yourself and the employee. What you cannot do, what you cannot do is furlough them and claim any of that money back, because they are not eligible for furlough pay. Watch this space, it may change, they may come up with an alternative solution, but as things stand at the moment, those people really are falling into the cracks.
And also, what about holiday pay? Does holiday continue to be accrued during furlough, and
Yes.
holiday booked during furlough? How does that work if they've already been booked?
Okay. Yes, you continue to build up an entitlement to holiday under your employment contract, without a doubt. If you've got holiday booked, again, this really comes down to a negotiation between employee and employer. You know, I heard one expert saying, why would you want somebody to take their holiday? Because you'd have to unfurlough them, put them back on the payroll and pay them, and then refurlough them, assuming there was no work for them to do. So in principle, it sounds like something as an employer you wouldn't want to do it. I think as an employee you could request it, and I think you would be on dodgy ground to refuse it, particularly, as you say, James, if that holiday was already booked in, because it is a contractual entitlement. There is an argument that there may be employers that do want to do that, even though it's going to cost them, because what they don't want is at the end of this process to have a load of staff then wanting to go on holiday, because depending on what business you're in, one might find themselves, when things improve, that they really need all hands on deck. So there may be commercial reasons why you as an employer may take the view, actually, you do want to incur that cost to get for the sheer benefit of getting that holiday entitlement out of the way. But ultimately, it comes down to a negotiation. And also, of course, you may get employees that say, well, I know I booked that holiday, but actually now that I'm furloughed, I don't actually want to take it now. Again, it has to be subject to negotiation between both parties. I don't want to stray into HR territory because it's not my territory, but I do understand that there has been some relaxation of the rules in terms of carrying holiday because of what's happening. So it may be that you won't end up with this situation where everybody comes back after furlough and then you've got this glut of holiday to get through before, say, the end of December. So I do believe that they have altered the rules. It's worth having a look at that in terms of allowing you to carry that time forward. Bit of a messy area, frankly, and ultimately, like with all these things, it comes down to agreeing a way forward with your employee.
And final question,
Okay.
when do we get our money?
Right, well, that's a very good question. We understand that the portal will be available from the end of April. We were told originally on or around the 21st, that in the latest release of information from the government, it said the end of April, so clearly they are struggling, which isn't a surprise. Again, it's very important, as we made we made the point in the previous Q&A that you as an employer understand the difference between processing your payroll, i.e. paying the pay, reporting and paying the pay, and the reclaim. They are two separate processes. And you will claim in lumps. And we will provide that information to you so that you can make those claims when the portal is up and available. We don't know when that will be. Part of the information you will have to provide when you make that claim will be your bank details. So clearly they are getting themselves into a situation where they will be able to just put the money on your claim into your bank account. But how long that is going to take, we don't know. We don't know. And you know, one of the issues potentially is what checking HMRC are going to be doing and how long that may take. I think the things to make sure to put yourself in the best position will be to claim as early as you can once the portal is up and running, but bear in mind there could be all manner of technical problems with that portal, particularly whether it can cope with the sheer volume when it's first up and running. As ever, we always recommend with these things, it's like phoning the revenue, do it at 8 o'clock at night, not 10:30 in the morning. So it will be worth attempting to get on there and do that reclaim in the wee small hours. The other thing is that we're assuming that they will want to have seen that audit trail through the payroll. So report it, tell us what you're wanting to pay, let us report that through the RTI system so the revenue have got something to match against, so they can see that that has been processed through the payroll. I think if it's not gone through the payroll, I think you're going to struggle with that claim. And the other thing is, which again we don't know, it hasn't been said, but we have seen this before, HMRC as a general principle will not provide funding, for example, say for SNP, we've seen this in the past where you can apply for funding, if you are behind on your HMRC PAYE payments. So if you haven't made that March payment, which is due by the 19th of April, if you haven't made that payment, I don't know to what extent that may impact on your ability to make that claim at the end of April. Obviously, if you're under a time to pay arrangement, in other words, you've spoken to the revenue and you've agreed a time to pay, it won't be an issue. But if you have simply chosen to not make that March payment, that March payroll, pay those March payroll deductions over which are due, say, 19th of April, I just wonder to what extent you will not get that claim money back until that liability has been paid. I don't know. We've not been told that. There's been no guidance on it. But if you haven't made that payroll payment if you're not planning on paying that March P30, which is due in April, if you are intending not to pay it because you are wanting to use that cash flow in order to pay your April salaries, then please contact HMRC and get a time to pay arrangement in place, because potentially it might impact on your ability to get that furlough claim. So we don't know, but that's my top tip. I know it's not easy getting through, but it must be easier now on that phone number. Right, James, are there anything else?
That's it.
We're done. We're done on this one. Okay, so thank you ever so much, James. Thank you everybody for your questions. If you have further questions, just keep asking them. Email, I think you will be able to comment below on this YouTube video, or drop us an email, any of us an email, and we will put together another Q&A as soon as we've got more questions and actually, probably more importantly, more answers. So take care, stay safe, and we'll speak to you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.